Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining today for this installment of the Women in Media virtual meetup. The Women in Media meetup brings together everyone in the media industry to discuss the most pressing trends in, of course, media, publishing, and advertising, while promoting mentorship and open dialogue on the industry. Typically held in person in New York City, the silver lining to the current circumstances is we're able to open our events to everyone across the globe through virtual webinars. Today, we'll be discussing one of the most pivotal annual moments for the advertising and media industry, the NewFronts and Upfronts. We are in the second year of the pandemic, and we'll be exploring how these events have evolved, how they are afraid of changing consumer habits, if they are really still relevant, and everything in between. We are so happy to welcome our speakers from across the US, the EVP of Media at GainShare, Rebecca Barr, Advisor and Strategist, Emmerich, and Jeanna Liu, Managing Director at CDX Advisors.
So we are here to talk about NewFronts, Upfronts, post-COVID, and if you guys are tuning in for this discussion, you're in the right place. If you're here to learn about NFTs, you're not in the right place, and you should just chat us, and I'll get you an invite to Clubhouse instead. But we're really excited to talk to you about everything that's happening as we kick off media buying season here in May. So before we really dive into the meat of it, I wanted to kind of level set the discussion for people who aren't media buyers in the audience. And so maybe kicking it off with Rebecca to just give us a sense of what the upfronts were like, pre-COVID, in its heyday, what your favorite parts of the upfronts were.
Yeah, no problem. So thank you for joining us, everybody. The upfronts in their heyday, yeah, they were a bit of a wild ride, and they've changed over the years. There's two components. There's the upfront presentation, which is a futures market. Everybody's there to see the broadcasters debut new programming, what their new primetime lineup is going to be, any integrations they have, things like that. And then there are the upfront deals that occur after that. The deals aren't happening on the spot where the presentations are taking place. They're media industry events. They can be anywhere from some networks roll out the red carpet type of thing, or it's a presentation, and then it's cocktails and food, and you generally meet the celebrities that are on those networks. Like Magnolia Network, you could meet the Gaineses and people like that. So if you have friends that are in the media world, you will see.
While we get Rebecca back up, we'll just let's move on to Amy, who can maybe talk to us a little bit about NewFronts, when those started, and how those have been different from the upfronts.
No problem. Nice to see everybody. Yeah, so the NewFronts started about 10 years ago. It was really there to just give a first look at the latest digital content from the biggest names in media, created by IAB. It was something very small, but it grew over time. Now it brings together thousands of brands and advertisers, media buyers, just to look at all these presentations, same as what Rebecca was talking about. It's always about big announcements, partnerships, new programming, and some conversations around topics that are going to shape the future of the industry, right? I bet, privacy, S&P, convergence, measurement, those are all discussed on the stage. I think my first NewFront was probably 2008, when they were first starting to become a big deal. I did Vice's first NewFront back then, and then I'd had to do Scripps Digital NewFront once they started doing a linear, for Upfront and NewFront. They had both, and then also their Upfront Roadshow, which was quite the show, obviously way before Discovery purchased them, and they were always really big. And then I had to host 5 of them for Refinery 29, and that was literally throwing a massive concert every year. And so it was always, I never really got to even attend that many other ones because I was hosting for 5, which sucked up your week in practice and rehearsal. But to Rebecca's point, the deals aren't getting made on the floor. That's for networking, connecting with people. I always feel like it's a competition of who does the best NewFront or Upfront, because all the trades will compare them against one another, not just looking at the programming, but the show itself. I think having digital ones kind of takes that pressure off. No one's judging the show anymore. Now we can really look at the meat of the programming and anything else anyone has to offer. But yeah, it's been interesting. I think the Upfront started in '62, by the way.
Oh,
So when you
wow.
look at
Okay.
NewFronts of only 10 years and Upfronts since 1962, ABC did the first one. I mean, that's quite an evolution.
Can you
Yeah,
guys
for
hear
sure.
me now?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I don't know what the
Amazing.
heck happened, but it was as soon as I'm like, Amy, over to you. And I saw it and like,
No, but no, we would love to jump back to Rebecca and hear the last part of what you were talking about with the upfronts.
I don't know how much you heard of it. I was just saying, if you have friends that are in the media world and you are connected to them on social media, that's why you will see them this time of year popping up all over social media with all these TV stars from all your favorite shows. It's because they circulate, you know, when they do the dog and pony show, they bring all the stars of the shows on the networks, and then they circulate at the cocktail party afterwards. So it's a lot of fun. I think I've been doing it for a long time. It was way more fun when I was a little bit younger and had more time, and probably didn't make as much money, so I counted on the meal at the cocktail party. But it's interesting, but it's one of those things now. And with the advent of the virtual things, it's become easier to see everything that's going on there. But I don't know who among us. I think everybody is a little burned out from the virtual Zoom type of thing. So there's going to be a balance there.
Yeah, for sure. I guess what I'm curious about, oh, sorry, go ahead, Amy.
I was just saying it's even interesting that they only do 12 to 4 now, because it used to start crack early in the morning when we were live all the way until the evening. And I think they're, you know, NewFronts at least is understanding, and even Upfronts the season, you know, A&E's already had theirs and the season's going so long, so they can give people some time and space between them. I think there's only one day where there's 2. So I do think, at least for IAB, they're thinking about like, how can we give so much information, allow people to consume it, versus in the real days, you were running all over the city.
For sure. And I think with the NewFronts too, they've condensed that over the years, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think it was 8 or 9 days initially. You know, it was spanned over 2 weeks, and now it's
2 weeks.
4 days. Yeah. Now it's 4 days. So there's been some changes there, but anyway, sorry, I'm going to mute and yell at my dog. Gina, you were going to ask.
Oh, no, all good. I think you guys dovetailed into the next question I had, which is, you know, last year for the first time, these events became completely virtual, right? And this year in May, they're going to be virtual again. So did you like the format? It sounded like there were some, you know, there was some compression of events, which was more efficient, or it seemed productive. But do you think in general there is valuable for networking and for deal making, or really more for just announcements and kind of you know, press release, you know, live press release sort of things? And I think, as Amy mentioned, maybe all the deals are getting done offline anyway. So yeah, so curious about your thoughts on the virtual format, if you think they're going to continue, if you think they add value.
Yeah, I'll start with the upfront piece of that. I would say last year it was really great because I was like, oh, I could use a break from all of this stuff. This year I'm missing a little bit of the interaction. I would say in terms of relationships or getting deals done, there's not too much difference. I mean, it was more of a social aspect to the events, but you do miss the in-person interaction. There is some relationship building that does happen. It is a see and be seen from a media perspective kind of scenario, but I don't think we're missing too much of that in terms of what those deals look like coming out of it, because we all know what we need to deliver for our clients and what's in their best interest. And I think we can still get that information outside of it. It's a different format. It's maybe a little bit less fun, but it's a little bit more manageable from a scheduling perspective.
Exactly. I think everyone's going to want to have a reason to network again. I do think presentation wise, everybody was already kind of moving away from the traditional format before the pandemic hit. You know, I was telling you, Scripps used to do a road show, and, you know, Viacom moved to something similar. On the NewFront side, you know, before the digital NewFronts, Vice discussing, like, is there another way to do this that's more in line with our brand, you know? And I think people have been trying to find interesting ways to do it. So I don't know if it'll be definitely back to everyone does stage shows in real life, but I do think people are going to be looking for reasons to network in real life once again. So there might be pieces of it that stay virtual, and I think a lot more shareability with what people show inside the presentations, because I think that's always been something that we was moving towards before this too. But I don't necessarily think it'll go away. It'll probably just converge eventually. And they kind of have, right? NewFront kind of lays during the course of the upfront.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, I mean, I think as we think about media and content unbundling and rebundling and unbundling and rebundling again, and more recently, obviously, streaming completely taking over everything. Do you think there's really even a need for two separate events, right? And has one started to become more prominent than the other? Are people more excited about one? Do you think there will eventually be a convergence of the two?
I mean, because IAB runs NewFronts, I don't know, I think in the mind of the buyer and where they're going, they're already converged because the time frames are around the same. But I don't know if it will ever become that like one disappears. I don't think, not in the next few years, at least.
I agree with that, Amy. I do think we're seeing something interesting this year where Hulu is pulled out of the the NewFront, and they are with Disney this year. So that's the first kind of converged all platform video for Disney. But to Amy's point, I don't think that we will see the NewFronts going away. And I think that linear TV will also hold on. It makes it convenient just from a buying perspective, just to see the whole ecosystem across, all the platforms that broadcaster or publisher offers. It does make it easier, but we'll get into it. There's other things popping up. There's audio, there's experiential, there's sports, things like that. So as much as it would be really convenient to have everything in one place, to have one view of it, I don't know that we're going to get there. We might get there with video in some regards, but I think with the IAB, that's their portion of the marketplace. And I think that will go on for quite a while.
And look, last year, MasterCard and Unilever did try to delay the purchase, as well as trying to say, listen, the upfront process, we want to abolish it, and let's let advertisers make the buys outside of the traditional timeline. I don't think that caught fire, but I think the ones that will have to force the change will not be on the brand sides who are making the presentations. It'll be the buyers, and they'll say, we don't want to work inside this timeline anymore. And it's just breaking tradition, right? It's a tradition of upfront ad buying, which is where the name comes from, since '62. I do think with the way digital you're able to purchase, it doesn't really fit in the same buying, but it is good to line up press around your brand and raise the awareness level of it, so you can share all that programming to drive interest amongst the buyers for the whole year. So, sure. but it'll come from them before it comes from IAB.
I think that's an interesting point too, Amy, when you're talking about bigger advertisers, MasterCard and such. That was messaging last year. It was a little easier marketplace to have that messaging because upfront deals were way down last year. No one knew it was going to happen in the marketplace. There was a lot of advertisers that pulled out. And now we're back. We're still in the pandemic, but looking over the back half of the year, I think we're going to see a pretty competitive marketplace. So I think we will see some brands taking a slight gamble and doing those upfront deals, despite not knowing exactly what the viewership levels and things like that are predicted to be. But we're going to see, it's going to be travel's comeback story, I think. And then, entertainment, restaurants, automotive in a big way. I think we will see a pretty big uptick in business over the back half of the year. So I could see the upfront deals being a little healthier than we would have maybe anticipated in a pandemic.
I guess that brings us to a pretty interesting segment where, as we're coming up on the media buying season, right, starting next month, are there major predictions that you have for this TV buying season that either are different from last year? So, Rebecca, you mentioned, the deals might be a little bit healthier this year, especially, in the back end. Are there any surprises in the lineup of these events that you're seeing? Are there any changes in key headliners, things like that? Curious your thoughts.
Amy, you want to take that? I know there's some changes on the NewFront side.
Well, look, Amazon's doing it for the first time. They were supposed to do it last year, but they pulled back because it got delayed. So that's going to be interesting. Amazon took over, right? I think they're going to be able to ride out the Apple privacy changes that come around transparency. I think they gained 10% of the digital ad market in 2020. So like they're not having a problem. So they're a major player that's going to define what happens for everyone else this year. Roku's doing their second NewFront, and there's been a lot of talk since they bought Quibi and what's going on with original programming there. So that's going to be, interesting. I think Snap's been crushing new formats. So just from a programmer standpoint, I believe the next creative and the next Spielberg could come from a Snapchat original, just because the way they're truly utilizing the technology and grasping that Gen Z in a way that I just don't think any other people are. Places like Conde, I mean, the amount of changes that have happened from leadership, and who knows, it's anyone's guess what that NewFront's going to look like. I think one of the biggest stories will be the total audience metric. Right? It's kind of like the conversion we were talking about already. A&E already went. That was their big headline. 2,500 hours of new programming, total audience metric. You're going to hear that term, I think, from like everyone. It's about how we pull it together versus how we separate it. Everyone trying to flaunt big numbers, but simplifying it for the buyers. I think that's going to be like the biggest thing. So it's almost like, yes, the creativity is exciting, but the creativity behind how do you make it simpler to purchase the audience that you want is going to be like the technology of it is going to be more interesting. I think.
Yeah, it is interesting with that, like making it simpler to your point. And then we're talking about, should the NewFronts and the Upfronts be together? And they really should be, but it's probably not going to happen for various reasons that we don't need to dig too deep into. But it is, the networks are trying to make it easier. I think they are blurring the lines with their presentations and the Upfronts and the NewFronts. They're talking a little bit cross-platform, just to give you a sense of it. It would be, from a buying perspective, it would be great to have that in one place. Again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but they really are. They're trying to give you a sense of that and to make it easier for the buyers, because at the end of the day, it's going to be about data and measurement and transactions, and they know that. I mean, the same way there's been struggles, probably too strong of a word, but everybody knows that what needs to be done in terms of measurement, it's the same in the early days of attribution. Everybody is trying to crack that code. So they're putting it out there on both sides at least. But I think that's an important shift, I think, in the climate of these presentations.
Yeah,
I mean, it's always good to remind everybody, like, we're talking about billions of dollars. Like, even when there's a decline, it's still billions. We're looking at, like, it was once 58 billion, and now, I think 20 was 50 billion. So yes, losing $8 billion in the market can affect you, but you're still looking at anywhere between 50 to 60 billion dollars moving around across all the platforms. That's a crazy amount of money.
No, and you're speaking my language now, being the finance and the banker in the room here. So in terms of ad budgets, I guess, as we think about, the deep pockets at some of these events, how are you seeing any changes in ad budgets now? I know last year, obviously, there was some cut on spending. Who has the deepest pockets now, and who's doing the biggest deals?
Rebecca, that might be more your side from a buyer standpoint.
No problem. Yeah, so where we anticipate the biggest deals really are going to come from the travel, entertainment, automotive spaces. And when I say entertainment, that encompasses movies. Those are all things that really took the hardest hit in the early days of the pandemic and really through the meat of the pandemic. We have other brands that we work with that are more performance-based and not in those categories, and they have benefited greatly from the pandemic, just in terms of the hockey stick curve on TV viewership and connected TV viewership. And also in terms of, there was some softness in the marketplace, so your media dollar was working harder for you. But that is going to, where there was no impact for those advertisers early on, they're going to see the impact on the lag effect when things go back to normal, because the travel, entertainment, automotive that have hung back a little bit, they're going to spend pretty heavily, and it's going to really increase the tightness of the marketplace. It's going to cost more to get the real estate that we had before, and viewership levels are going to return a little bit more to normal. They're going to change for sure in ways that I don't think we can quantify just yet, but it's definitely going to come back more to that normal trend, and we'll see some seasonal patterns. We saw some really crazy patterns, like over the summer, viewership was through the roof, like you would never see that. So I think that's what we're going to see. You know, that's pretty heavy on the linear side, but also the connected TV side is a similar pattern.
Huge.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I wanted to go back to a point that Amy made before about, you know, Roku and the Quibi deal, and how some of these, you know, new deals have brought new entrants to the NewFronts, and I think that'll continue. Are there industries that you think have traditionally been excluded from these events that you would like to see, or that you think should be included?
I just always am interested to see what's going on with gaming. You know, Twitch sits outside of this, and I just think some of the work that they're doing is so fascinating, and it's real original, creative, and they have a captivated audience. So, you know, the gaming, you know, business and industry has esports NewFront, they have sports NewFront. But again, it's kind of around, you know, it's like in a few weeks. So the timing's not far. It's a little before ours, but since some of these are, you know, I would love to just be able to see how it's layered on top of each other. They're spoken about as if they're so separate, but the fan base probably doesn't have as much duplicative as you think. So it'd be fascinating to see that a part of it.
Yeah, and I think on just dovetailing off of that, Amy, I think we also see with podcasting, they have their own NewFront week after the NewFronts on the digital side. So there's audio there. There's gaming, and it's funny, as much as we want to stitch together the marketplace, I think because the appeal for each of those applications is somewhat different in terms of audience, I think that's where the stakeholders on that side are always going to just dig their heels in, because they're not going to want to attach themselves to audio or to linear or to whatever. You know, everybody wants their own voice. So, you know, we're always looking for, you know, efficiency in how we evaluate all the opportunities, but I don't know that we'll get there, and we'll just have to choose wisely in terms of our attention in the marketplace. But everything's readily available. I mean, it has been for a while, even before virtual. You know, you can get the press kits and all of that stuff, and you generally get a recording of the presentation and have a cocktail while you watch it, whatever you want. But you know, that stuff is pretty available, and so you can stack it all up and evaluate it across, you know, what you need for your brand.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I did want to just take a second for the audience to say, if you have any questions as we're chatting here, definitely shoot them over to us in the chat box, and we'll try to get to them over the course of our discussion, or even at the end. But to go back to Rebecca's point, you know, consumer behavior has changed a lot over the past, you know, year, and certainly over the past decade, in terms of discovery, brand loyalty, things like that. How do you think, in general, this is affecting advertising across all platforms?
I mean, we're all digital citizens now, right? It shifted our behavior. It took 1 year to do something that would have taken 15. So to Rebecca's point about podcasting or AI and voice, I think you're going to see some shifting there. So that will be because of what's happened. A lot of people are moving to digital. I mean, forever digital publishers were expecting the spends to equalize what it was on television, and it never really did that. But now, if there was ever a shot at seeing that happen, that's going to be part of it. I think also just watching DTC and how it changes the market is going to be fascinating, and how the purchase is there. Discoverability is going to be the biggest fight of all. I think it was some ridiculous, like last year we watched 23,000 years worth of video content. Like that's how much we all consumed, which is psychotic. So, you know, like how and who and what and where, and trying to fight for that discoverability, you know, I think is going to be one of the biggest talking points on stage.
Yeah, I agree, Amy. And I think also just in terms of not only our buying media or consumer habits changing, but media consumption is changing. Some of it is, you know, we've seen the big increase in TV and video consumption. That's going to come back to earth a little bit. I mean, this is outside of this, but when you think of like out-of-home, digital out-of-home transit, that type of inventory, you know, people aren't commuting the way they were. So, and it's never going to go back to the same way it was. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but our business has clicked along just fine, and productivity's actually increased. So there's not a big argument to be made for maintaining a lot of office space and forcing people to commute. So that's going to change things as well in terms of branding and things. So I think it's all incumbent on all of us just to review that mix and how do we get in front of the right people at the right time in terms of discovery and brand loyalty and in those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. So over the last, year or really 18 months, there's been a ton of deals on the M&A front, which is my bread and butter, around the content and media makers out there. Is there content, or are there specific media platforms that you think are churning out the best content these days that advertisers are excited about? Or name a few if it's hard to pick favorites. I know obviously the Apples and of the world and the Netflix and the Amazons are investing huge amounts into their content and into their slate. Do you think there are some who have done a really spectacular job over the last year or so in beefing that side, just from really an inventory perspective?
I mean, I'm always just amazed at Hulu. I cannot believe I pay to watch it, and then the clients, consumers, the clients are paying for ads. I'm always amazed that that's happening, and somehow they hook me every single time. So that's my own personal. I really thought TikTok did some great work last year, how they're working with brands and what they're doing. So I thought that was really fascinating and stood out across the board. Rebecca, I don't know if you have more. I'm trying to think. It's hard to choose.
I do agree with that. And just in terms of Hulu and in terms of their content too, like I think they've really brought it in terms of original content too. Like there's documentaries and there's other original content that has really come a long way. I mean, I had a presentation the other day internally, and we were just talking about how, everybody says TV or video or whatever is dying. And it's like, there's just so much original there's so much original scripted programming that it's like people are watching more than ever, and there's really a lot of great stuff out there. I'm just trying to think in terms of ad supported, like Hulu really comes to the top of mind. But as you said, like TikTok is a big one as well.
That's actually really interesting and news to me and maybe news to the audience in terms of if you can expand on that a little bit more. What was really great about the TikTok effort last year and going into this year?
They just made a concerted effort on how they can work with brands in a more organic way and beef up the consumption and then track it aggressively to deliver on those metrics. And it's not two brands that you would have normally expected to see together. So I think it was a great strategy for Walmart's side, and TikTok embracing it and outperforming and delivering on that campaign. So I wouldn't say anything specific to the content itself, just the overall was really wild to watch.
Got it. Well, you're touching on another topic that I think is exciting and people are interested about, which is around data and around measurement, right? Because I think traditionally, you've had the Nielsen's and the ComScores of the world, doing some of that. How are you seeing, measurement changing as a lot of these different media platforms are converging and coming out? It's almost impossible to have one single platform, right, do measurement these days and also to measure impact, right, and audience and engagement. What are you seeing around that? Who's doing that well or better than others?
I mean, I feel like for the last 5 years, I've heard everyone stand on a stage and say, we're going to be everywhere they are and get them everything they're watching. But I do think right now consumers, they make no distinction anymore between like forms of video, right? It could be video means everything everywhere to them. But now you've got to organize the industry that way for cross-platform publishing and frequency and measurement and attribution. And I think the total audience metric that we talked about is going to be the major way to spin it. I can't speak to who's doing it the best because sometimes my cynical side just thinks everyone's doing a lot of smoke and mirrors. So everybody is, but I think the thing that will matter now is conversion. So even though it was once relevancy and awareness, and you could tout any single, metric for that, likability, shares, everything, engagement. But now that you have to show conversion, who are you moving to purchase something? That's going to be the metric that leads the dollar.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Amy, I think in terms of audience measurement, Jeanna, you touched on it, where Nielsen has always been the standard there, and they have had ComScore nipping at their heels for quite a while. They always have the modeled panel data, which, some people love, some people shoot holes in, because it is a staggeringly low amount of data that they are modeling the whole country off of. And that always freaks people out. It freaks me out a little bit, but it's been the standard. They have announced, and so has ComScore, that they have tools, and I think they're launching later this year or in beta, that's cross-platform measurement that is going to be, across addressable TV and linear. It's got one form of measurement. Again, it will be the modeled panel data, but it's also including set-top box data and also automated content recognition from smart TVs. So as with Amy, Jeanna, I can't speak to who's doing it best, and it is a little bit of smoke and mirrors, but it is a bit of an arms race into who can do it first and who can do it best. And Nielsen's always had a target on their back. So I don't know that they will be the standard per se in the new world order, but I know they are putting a lot of time, effort, energy, resources, as is ComScore, into this. So we'll see who comes up with something that the industry not only can live with, but that really embraces.
I mean, and look, all the conversations around cookies or no cookies, and the measurement strategies around that. And we're going to have to see the third party data people evolve and change. So whether that's two filter, Nielsen, double verify, everyone's going to have to shift around what the world looks like for that. Is it going to be, an upside for publishers who for a long time had their own first party data, but it didn't seem as big or organic with what they wanted from third parties? But you've got players like Amazon who own more data than you can imagine, and TikTok and Snap, who do an unbelievable job moving that, and they're way ahead of the game for those viewerships than the networks were. They're trying to catch up on that. So I think that'll be a major one that decides it. And to Rebecca's point, I've been reading that Nielsen's going to move away from age and gender, which is really, stop doing demographics and using psychographics, which is what the publishers were doing way ahead of the game. You don't want women 18 to 49 anymore. You want mothers from the age of 26 to 40, living in X spot. So it's become so niche that it's going to be interesting to see how we even divide up the audience segmentation of who they're buying and why they're buying it. And that might allow for a broader sense of where they're buying. So it's not just one large programmatic buy. They might shift across many opportunities to get the exact target they want.
That makes sense.
Exciting development in the age of convergence between TV and digital, because I've spent most of my career on the linear side of the equation, and it is that age gender thing where, you are targeting based on a hypothesis, based on pretty decent data, but you don't know. With connected TV, it's breathtaking how granular you can get with it, and how far you can drill down into the past the demographics, into the psychographics, affinity, shopping habits, anything there. It's the business side of me thinks that is the coolest thing ever. The me side of me is, it's a little scary. I'm careful what I put out there because I know how it gets used. But
once that Apple privacy, I can't wait to see where all my data is.
I know.
It's going to be fascinating.
I know. It's so crazy. But anyway, I think it's really exciting developments. It's great. It's kind of like front row seat, get your popcorn and watch, what the Nielsen's and the ComScores, and there's a million other companies of the world, how they're going to handle this, how they're going to track, how they're going to target, how we're going to quantify it. I think it's really exciting.
And you mentioned shopping, right? That's going to be a big one when you ask who's done it well. Amazon with that Fenty show. If you don't want to buy every bra and undies that you saw during that video, I don't know what you're doing during COVID, but it's an amazing way that I think they coined it T-commerce, but everyone, clickable video has been around, I feel like, since I made video, but it never caught on for whatever reason. And I think there's an opportunity now to see that blow up. And I don't know who will be most advanced, but it feels like Amazon is, to be able to buy the things that you're watching Scripted has a much more peculiar timeline to pull that off, especially for clothes, but the digital ways have, that you can play with that. I mean, Amazon obviously is in the forefront of that, but I think you're going to see some interesting things from, Facebook and Instagram, and like Snap and TikTok for purchase like that.
Yeah, for sure.
That part will be fun.
I guess a couple of things that you touched on that I wanted to expand on a little bit. One, just from a content perspective, there's obviously been a lot of talk about snackable content and short form content, and there's another camp, right, that thinks that long form is still the way to go. We won't beat a dead horse too much on Quibi and things like that. But how do you think about content more generally, or media more generally, in terms of as it pertains to advertising and as it pertains to consumption and consumer trends? Are you seeing that snackable content in short form is still there's still a market for that, or do you think long form and quality is still going to be the predominant driver of a lot of this?
It's all coming down to storytelling, right? Whether that's 30 seconds or 3 hours. If you have a good enough story and you can drive the message home, it's gonna work. And everyone's consuming it in all different ways. Some people will only listen to 20-minute podcasts, while others listen to an hour and a half. So you're looking for every direct connection that you can, but the story is going to drive it. I think the main thing for programming is going to be diversity. You're not just going to see in front of the camera change. You're going to hear all about, everyone's going to start being responsible, something they should have been doing for years and years, behind the lens. Who is making it? And I think the younger generation cares more about that. And then third, I'd probably say branded entertainment. I think Netflix, that's another one though, ahead of the game. As far as you watch Stranger Things, you can point out the amount of advertisers that are inside these machines without having to say anything about them. No direct close-up. They're just planted easily. You could tell Netflix is getting both sides, pulling the money in there, but it's so organic that the viewer is not bothered by it at all. So I think that's another big uptick you'll see across the board from everyone, is more branded entertainment.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it depends on the audiences we're reaching and the products that we're reaching them on their behalf. Because the shorter content, I agree, like that is definitely going to be more applicable for your Gen Z type of audience, and you get toward Gen X, the higher age brackets of Gen X. That's going to be a little bit longer. People will sink their teeth in. But what we've seen as we all age, and we've all been growing up in the digital age now, even if we weren't born digital natives, we're seeing some of those tactics, like it's starting to get a little bit older as everybody, gets a little bit older. So we will see that the shorter things, which used to only be the very youngest part, we're starting to see that creep up a little bit too. But it is about finding a mix. Amy is right. It's about telling the story. And even within the age brackets, that's not a be all end all, because, there's just people that are outliers that they just want a really small, quick thing. And there's others that have 3 hours to kill and really want the story. So, I think we always have to find a new way to develop that across those demographics. There's no one set and forget type of thing, but there's a lot of variables I think we need to consider there as well.
Yeah,
I've always been interested in like commercials. The reason why people like on air is because you can drive direct purchase from the commercials in specific areas and states. But that mattered because shelf space mattered. And now as retail is moving more to digital, and shelf space is not as important, but just conversion is overall, and the consumer habits are now buying more online, will it finally lower, how interesting that commercial is, but how you utilize the same story across all the digital platforms so you could drive it and actually finally track click to purchase. So I do think that shift is going to be really, really fascinating in the next 2 years.
Yeah, and I think that when you say click to purchase, like that's a big thing. And I think, and also like real estate on some media like linear TV, it's expensive, and there's in the CPMs and some of the more premier connected TV, it's expensive. So it's just all about that shorter and driving the search behavior, to just get the funnel and then start to drive that search behavior. and hitting them with other messages, but but shorter will be better in that case, because the economics are going to work a little bit better, even than like a 30, like a 15 or a 6 works great for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you brought up connected TV. I mean, one thing that is fun that is not a part of NewFronts, but practically every media buyer goes, is CES. And as a creative and business, when you go to CES and see what the next evolution of televisions is and how that will drive how we watch and what we buy, I think the fact is no one cares where the show comes from, right? If you're watching Vikings, you probably don't even remember it was on History, because now you're watching it on, Amazon. So everybody already has these smart remotes that I don't think has caught on as a habit fast enough yet. But whoever comes out with the right tech that helps you just find the show you want the fastest and the cheapest way to view it, that's going to be also a game change. Remember when like DVR came out and everyone thought it would be the death of the commercial, which didn't happen. I do think the idea though that we're not going to pay for these subscriptions forever. It's out of control. It's like bigger than the cable bill. Everyone's cutting the cable cord, and if you can get the TV tech to actually help you save money to find what it is you want to watch in the most affordable, efficient way. And I think that's coming, even though that has nothing to do with NewFronts. I find that very, if you were going to watch anything, I'd pay attention to what the tech looks like. Even for an advertiser, I remember even last year's CES had wearable imaging that you could wear, basically monitors, and plug any ad into it you wanted, flexible framing. It was unbelievable. I was like, people will become the new billboard. I mean, it's like that. And once that shifts, obviously outdoor last year could not have had any fun. I mean, no one was outside. So who was buying advertising outside, which is normally a huge market around award season? And that basically died, like what could have been an alternative. And I think now you're going to see another innovation push and an alternative ways to market, kind of like Minority Report in the future. We're going to have advertising everywhere in our faces, including the bathroom. And then that will shift how the purchase buys. I get a little sci-fi dorky on you. Sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. You touched on something that I hadn't really thought about before, but you guys have probably, as a natural evolution as you think about the media buy. So I spent a lot of time with technology companies on the ad tech side and the MarTech side. And one trend that I'm seeing that's happening is thinking about connected TVs and, the Rokus and, the channel TV guides, as it were, as the next marketplace, right? And there's no real measurement to do that. So as the second that you log on to, your Netflix account or your Roku or your Fire Stick, you're now seeing these digital shelves in the same way that you're, shopping for groceries, right, at Whole Foods. And that inventory, that inventory needs to be managed, right? Right now, if you're a content or a publisher, there's really no way for you to know, what shows are being advertised or, what shelf space, that's taking up, and you're paying for the shelf space, but you're not sure that, how people are discovering it or whether people are even, able to discover it or to see it. And I think that's really going to be a huge trend that emerges from the technology side. I'm already seeing a couple of companies that are starting to do to create those sort of marketplaces, right? And thinking about that as opportunities to monetize and optimize, right, from a brand and advertiser perspective. Absolutely. And then, making that one more programmatic, and two, doing it again in a way that maximizes eyeballs. But, if you're Hulu and you have a new show to promote, you probably want that front and center, in a given time period and things like that. So thinking about that TV guide as a marketplace, was something that blew my mind as a completely new paradigm, and a completely new way to think about consumption and the ad buy.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And when you think of Roku and the possibilities there, I'm not sure how many people have it, but there's like a landscape that comes on almost like their home screen, and they have billboards in the landscape that highlight the shows. And imagine when that becomes interactive and people are placing their ads for the clothes that you can drive direct to purchase there. Like the opportunities haven't begun. And then once they get into original programming, you know, again, so many options, so many places. And I think it's been interesting. We didn't even mention how many new people are in the market with new programming. And so you're going to need more places to market this. Back in the day, you would never put an back in the day, an ABC show on CBS to market it. And remember how that started shifting over time? Like you're going to be, and now you're watching everything Netflix on Hulu while it plays next to, you know, I mean, it's going to all just keep morphing together, but I'm sure Rebecca could speak to this. You're probably always looking for new ways to buy, new innovative places to place the ad.
Yeah, we constantly are. There's a million different things that we evaluate. I mean, there's the tried and true just spot purchases, but we look for opportunities for integration into shows and billboards that like video billboards that go alongside and things like that. You know, we're always looking at, we do a lot of what we do is measurement just in terms of performance marketing. So it's like attribution is a huge component of that. But we are always looking for new and different and better, and you know, like where do you get those incremental eyeballs? How can you extend the reach of your regular TV programming?
Yeah.
And what's go ahead, Jean.
I was going to say, what's so fascinating is that, you know, in different geographies, you have completely different inventory, right? And people have different rights to shows and things like that. So there are exponentially growing opportunities as you think about connected TV. In terms of shelf space and places to advertise.
Right.
You know, the one thing I don't think Complex is participating in NewFronts. I could be wrong. I wish someone could correct me. But experiences, you know, that was a huge push before all this. Obviously, that entire business took such a hit during COVID. But I think we're going to see some of that coming back on the stages in small doses. But as you talk about new ways to track that measurement, you know, I was in the early days of that. And are we tracking per head, per viewership? How much more does it mean to someone physically experiencing a brand versus virtually? But I think you'll see a few announcements from a couple of these brands that they're bringing back small, not just digital, but real life experiences. I think they'll start to make a comeback.
Yeah. So we do have a few questions from the audience. So let me just open that up and dive in. Here's one. Thoughts on ad-supported FAST networks, Peacock, Pluto, Stir, Distro TV. Are there too many? Will there be consolidation?
Well, I heard Donna Speciale is also building one called Prende TV. It's going to be announced for Univision. So Rebecca, you're the buyer, so you should.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it feels like, holy cow, there's too many. I mean, I think, I hate to say this out loud, but I think we remember that the earlier days of cable, there, you know, maybe there's 30 networks and then 57 channels and nothing on. Now there's 400, whatever there is, networks, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And it's the same that's developing in the streaming space. I think it does feel like there are too many. I do think there will be consolidation as we see it, you know, like with CBS, even with Viacom, they have CBS Interactive, they have Pluto, they have Paramount. And I could see that eventually folding into one streaming platform. It will be interesting to see if that comes to be. I don't have any insider information, but it's just something where, you know, there's some overlap, but then there's some segmented things, and it may just be a better foot forward to have that all in one place. We'll have to kind of sit back and see how that develops. But I do think some of the smaller streaming, the more one-off type things, I think we will, of the more viable ones, I think we will see consolidation just in terms of acquisition, which is Jeanna's specialty and things like that. We'll see other companies acquiring that, and they may assemble a network with bought up little streaming platforms to make a much bigger presence. I would not be surprised to see that.
Yeah, makes sense. And
another, the name of the game everywhere.
Yes.
You know, there's little small niche influencers building massive businesses, 6 to 7 figures for one person, right? All around newsletters for $1 a month or $5 a month. I mean, everybody's in the name of the game of subscription. So I think you'll see more. Plus ads, because everybody starts to get greedy and they need more money. And advertisers are going to need more places. So I'm sure they'll do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And another question here for Rebecca is addressable TV finally here? And is it possible to make those kinds of campaigns as scalable on OTT as it is on linear?
Yeah, I do think it is here to stay for sure, especially as the people that were born digital natives, they don't know anything else. They're all, as we all are, they're all aging, and it's going to bring all that up. So it's definitely here to stay. In terms of scale, I don't know that we will see, because just the broad impact of the reach on linear TV, I don't know that we'll see that same weight for addressable, because that's much more one-to-one. Though, because the way the targeting works, it's like at the household level in general. So I think that those will always be good complementary types of tactics. But I also think it will depend, and to go back to the demographic you're trying to reach, the age demographic you're trying to reach right now. If you want to reach the millennials, Gen Z, connected TV addressable is definitely the way to go. There are some people like myself, you know, that is definitely on the older end of the spectrum, but I am much more on the addressable side of in how I consume video. So there are, you have to play around with it, but I do think it's definitely here to stay, and there will be scale. I don't think on par with linear TV, but I think it will grow over the years just as the consumers age that have grown up with that type of technology.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think we have time for maybe one last question here. Do you see an evolution where all media, including legacy, print, newspapers, will be video businesses that have ads? Maybe a good one for Amy, coming from the publisher and content creator side.
I mean, I feel like everyone is becoming a media company. What they mean by that, I don't know, but look at the Times. I mean, I think it's unbelievable what the Times has done, and they flipped from print to digital and added in that video level, and it's really moved to that. So yeah, there's too much opportunity. So everyone is gonna, I mean, that's what I believe we're seeing now with the networks. I mean, that's what's happened. They eventually moved. At first, they were going to buy up the smaller publishers, then realized they could build it themselves, and that's what's been happening. And it's all moving to digital video. So, yeah, I think it's only just begun.
I think they have to survive, right? Like it's, you know, some of those things, and we saw it, you know, in the late aughts, I would say, with magazine publishing and things like that. Like the ones that Condé Nast did a pretty good job. Like they were able to push out like digital, and then they've expanded their video offering and things like that. Like they're thriving. They've had some other issues, which we don't need to dig into. That's a big hole. But they're, you know, they've done a pretty good job. And you mentioned the Times, they've also done a good job. And you can look across the landscape and see, you know, in the Chicago, we have a Tribune company, which has flailed for years. And you know, they're going to have to figure it out. But I think that has to be a component for survival of that type of media.
I mean, I think Scripps, the newspaper industry, not the one bought by Discovery, but is also fascinating. It started as paper and video, and now Newsy is on every connected TV known to man. So again, you're going to see these. I think it's already happened, but you'll see more. And every brand is now becoming video first because it's marketing for their brand, no matter where they can place it. I think Headspace is what Morgan's done there, and the shows that they have on Netflix with that deal. Is it driving, you know, conversion? I'm not sure. It's great marketing for Headspace. It gets the brand out there in a new way, and then they'll be able to find a way to monetize that through either clients or consumers eventually on the app. So yeah, I think we'll see more of it.
No, for sure. Well, I think we're coming up on the final couple minutes here. I don't know if Amy or Rebecca, you had any final thoughts. It sounds like, you know, with all of the things happening in media, neither the NewFronts or the Upfronts are going away anytime soon. And any final remarks you have as we gear up for the May media buying season?
This was great. The only other thing I'd add is SPAC deals, at least on the digital front. They won't be on the stages, but they'll be in the trades nonstop, wrapped around NewFronts. So pay attention for that. Otherwise, Nina, thanks so much. This was great.
Yeah, and I just, for me, I just want to reiterate, like I think it's so exciting. I mean, it's I think there are some people in the industry that are a little less excited with all the tech, and, you know, like it keeps you on your toes. Like, you know, there is not a moment to rest for any of us here, just in terms of competing in this marketplace. But I think it's exciting. And to Amy's point about CES, if you haven't been there, not that this is an ad for CES, but it is Wonderland. It's fantastic. But it is a great way to see what's coming in terms of how people consume video, you know, from devices to the latest TV technology. And it's a good place to start, but I can't wait for the future. Like, there's so much great stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and hopefully we'll see everyone soon on a live event or a conference or a CES or a South by Southwest or a NewFront or an Upfront. But I'll turn it over to Sammy. Thank you so much for having us and for hosting this Women in Media.
Yes, thank you so much. Such a great conversation, and thank you all for tuning in. This recording will be shared on our social channels and blog soon, so be sure to keep a lookout. And please join our Women in Media meetup group on meetup.com and to stay up to date with our event programming. We hope to see you all again next time.